It's nearing the end of summer, and I think today is the perfect day to make some sourdough einkorn pizza. We're starting off with a 1/4 cup of refreshed einkorn starter. I like to use whole grain flour, and I grind it myself with a grinder. Next, we're adding 1½ cups of filtered water, and I like to use reverse osmosis water. We are combining the starter and the water until smooth, and then we're adding 5½ to 6 cups of whole grain einkorn flour. You can start with 5½ cups and add more as needed. Keep in mind it will be different if you're using a white flour or a white einkorn flour. In that case, you might need to add more to your recipe because this is a whole grain recipe, but I suggest using whole grain for all of its health benefits. Next, we're adding about 3 teaspoons of salt. I like to use Redmond's Real Salt. It's a cleaner salt that is tested for microplastics. Combine everything as best you can with a spatula, and after that you can start to use your hands until all the ingredients come together. We're going to let that rest for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to start kneading the dough. When I'm working with einkorn, I prefer to knead the dough in the bowl and to keep my hands wet. We are going to cover that and let that rest for 8 hours or overnight on the countertop. This is what it should look like when it's ready to go. I'm making mine into 2 larger pizzas, but you could make smaller pizzas too. Separate your dough into the number of pizzas you want, form them into balls, and then spread your dough out on parchment paper. I like to start with my hands and then use a rolling pin if needed. Remember to keep your hands wet so that this einkorn doesn't stick to your hands. Cover your pizza rounds with a cotton or linen cloth and let that rest while you preheat the oven to 500 degrees with your pizza pan in the oven. I like to use a cast iron pizza pan. Let your pizza rounds rest for 30 minutes. While that's preheating, you can get all of your ingredients for your toppings ready. I highly recommend using fresh basil over dried. Now it's time for the toppings, which you can add whichever toppings you like, but I'm going to show you how to make kind of a traditional margarita pizza. I like to use strained tomatoes or crushed tomatoes in glass. I don't like to use tomatoes that are canned in metal. I add about 1/3 cup of the tomatoes to the pizza and I spread it around. Then I spread my fresh basil on top of the tomato sauce and I break them up a little bit to release some of the flavor. And next it's time for the cheese. I usually use Organic Valley pasture-raised mozzarella. You can add as little or as much as you like, but you'll notice by the end of this video we are cheese lovers, so I add about 1/2 of an 8-ounce block per pizza. Then I sprinkle salt on top. Now it's time to bake our pizzas. So once your oven is preheated to 500 degrees, get your pan ready and put your parchment paper with a pizza directly onto the pan. You're going to bake until the cheese is browning and it looks nice and delicious. It probably takes about 7 to 12 minutes depending on how thick you made your crust. I prefer a more thin crust pizza, especially with whole grain flour. This pizza is so delicious and healthy because we're using whole grain einkorn flour. I hope you found this tutorial inspiring and easy to follow so you can make einkorn sourdough pizza at home too.